first thing I remember is the sound of the room going quiet. Not the polite kind of quiet that falls over a dinner table when someone clinks a glass and asks for attention. The hollow kind. The kind that happens when something true enters a space that has been living on lies for a very long time. My brother was standing at the head of the table, one hand resting on his investor's shoulder, the other gesturing toward me with a smile I had seen on his face my entire life. Practiced. Effortless. Designed to land. And this, he said, pausing just long enough to let everyone look, is my sister. She wanted to be an architect too. Didn't quite work out. My father laughed first. My mother followed, smoothing her napkin across her lap like the moment needed tidying. The relatives at the far end of the table exchanged a glance that said they understood the joke, even if they hadn't earned the right to make it. The investor didn't laugh. He set down his wine glass with a quiet, deliberate click. Then he looked at me, not at my brother. At me. I know who she is, he said. She's the reason I'm here. My name is Nora Callahan, and I have spent most of my life being the person in this family who exists in the margins. I was 12 when I first understood the arrangement, not in the way children understand rules they've been told. Don't run in the house, say please and thank you, but in the way you understand something that has never been spoken out loud and yet governs everything. My brother was 2 years older than me. His name was Marcus, and from the time he was old enough to be noticed, he was treated like the family's main event. My mother had a habit of describing him in superlatives. The smartest, the most driven, the one who would do something great. She said it the way some people recite prayers, steady and automatic, like the words had been worn smooth from overuse. I don't remember her describing me in superlatives. I remember her describing me in qualifiers. Nora is sweet. Nora tries hard. Nora will figure it out eventually. Eventually, that word sat in my chest for years like a splinter I couldn't reach. My father operated on a simpler system. He paid attention to whoever was winning. Marcus was almost always winning, so my father's attention followed Marcus through every science fair, every varsity letter, every speech at the dinner table about what he planned to build and where he planned to go. When my father looked at me, it was usually because he needed something. A ride somewhere, someone to pick up groceries on the way home, a quiet presence that wouldn't disturb the main story being told. I stopped trying to compete somewhere around 9th grade, not because I stopped caring, but because I realized competing for something that was never offered to you is a different thing entirely from competing for something that might be won. I turned inward. I found architecture. I found it in the way some people find religion, not through a single revelation, but through a slow accumulation of moments that begin to feel like meaning. The way a building can hold space for human experience without demanding to be noticed. The way a well-designed room can make a person feel, without them knowing why, that they belong there. I started drawing late at night when the house was quiet. Floor plans first, then elevations, then full concept sketches. My sketchbooks filled up one after another and lived in the bottom drawer of my desk, underneath old math homework and a broken watch I never got fixed. I applied to the architecture program at my state university without telling anyone. When the acceptance letter came, I read it 3 times, standing at the mailbox in the cold, and then I walked inside and placed it on the kitchen counter the way you set down something you're finally allowed to put down. My mother looked at it for a long time. Then she said, "Your father and I were hoping you might consider something more practical." Marcus was already enrolled in a business program 2 states away on a full scholarship my parents helped him apply for. The scholarship application had been a family project. I had proofread his personal statement. No one had proofread mine. I enrolled anyway. I paid for it through loans, a part-time job at a drafting firm downtown, and a small amount of savings I had been quietly accumulating since I was 16. My parents didn't come to my orientation. They drove Marcus to his campus themselves, and when they came back, my mother said the campus was beautiful and she wished they had taken more photos. I did not tell them what I wished. 4 years later, I graduated with honors and a portfolio that my thesis advisor described as the most sophisticated spatial thinking I've seen from an undergraduate in a decade. I framed the letter and put it in the bottom drawer. By then, I was used to keeping good things where they couldn't be touched. I took a position at a mid-sized firm in Portland called Hafford Design. The work was mostly commercial, office buildings, retail spaces, 1 or 2 boutique hotels. But within 18 months, I had developed a methodology for mixed-use development that began attracting the kind of attention that changes the shape of a career. I was invited to present at a regional conference. A real estate investment group out of Seattle reached out directly to discuss a partnership. Their name was Keswick Group. Their lead partner was a man named Daniel Hartwell, who had built a reputation for backing projects that other investors considered too ambitious or too strange to touch. He had an eye for design that was unusual in someone who spent most of his time reading financials, and when we spoke for the first time over the phone, I understood within 15 minutes that he had read everything I had published and remembered the specifics. I did not know then that my brother had also contacted him. Marcus had left his business program early to pursue real estate development. My father called it entrepreneurial instinct. My mother called it brave. What it actually was, as I would come to understand later, was a pattern of attaching himself to other people's credibility and presenting it as his own. He had a gift for the surface of things, the pitch, the room, the handshake, and he had learned early that the surface, in certain circles, was all that was required. He called me in October, 2 years after I had started at Hafford. He said he was working on a development project in the Pacific Northwest and could use some consulting input on the design side. Family rates, he said, just to get the concepts grounded. I should have understood then what was happening. The truth is, some part of me did, but the older, quieter part of me, the part that had grown up believing love from my family was something you earned through usefulness, agreed to help. I spent 6 weeks developing a full conceptual framework for the project, site analysis, zoning recommendations, a phased design approach that addressed the community integration concerns the city council had been raising. I sent it to him in a shared folder with my name on every document. 3 weeks later, I was CC'd on an email chain I was never meant to see. Marcus had forwarded my concept documents to Daniel Hartwell's team with a cover note that said he had developed a comprehensive approach to the project and was prepared to walk them through it at their earliest convenience. My name appeared nowhere in the forwarded materials. I read the email chain standing in the parking garage of my office building, one hand on my car door, the cold concrete smell of the structure pressing in around me. I read it twice. Then I got in my car and sat there for a while without starting the engine. I want to be careful here about what I did next, because I have seen people describe moments like this as the point where they decided to fight back, and I think that framing is too dramatic for what actually happened. I didn't decide anything dramatic. I opened my laptop on my passenger seat and I began, quietly and methodically, to document everything. The original files with their creation timestamps, the email chain, the shared folder access logs which showed when Marcus had downloaded each document and when those downloads had been followed by modifications under a different file name. I had a habit, a compulsive one. I had always thought of embedding a small identifying comment in the metadata of every design document I produced. A sentence from a book I liked, or a note to myself about the concept. It was invisible to anyone who wasn't looking for it, but it was there. I contacted Hafford's legal department, not to file anything, not yet, just to understand what I had and what it meant. The attorney I spoke with was a quiet woman named Patricia, who had a way of listening that made you feel like every word was being filed carefully in a place where it would not be lost. She looked at the folder I brought her and said, in the same tone you might use to describe a weather forecast, "This is fairly comprehensive." I kept documenting. Over the following weeks, I tracked the email correspondence between Marcus and Daniel Hartwell's team. I recovered older files from a backup drive I kept at the office. Sketches, concept notes, early studies that predated anything Marcus could claim to have originated. I spoke to a colleague at a conference who mentioned she had reviewed some early-stage materials for a project in the Pacific Northwest and recognized the methodology as distinctly mine. I didn't confront my brother. I didn't call my parents. I didn't tell anyone what I knew or what I was building. I worked in the evenings after the office emptied out, the city grid visible through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the conference room, where I spread my materials across the long table and cross-referenced timestamps with correspondence logs with project files. Most people think of collecting evidence as something aggressive. It never felt that way to me. It felt like the opposite of aggression. It felt like patience, like the slow, careful process of retrieving something that belonged to you from a place where it had been left without your permission. In late November, my mother called to tell me they were hosting Thanksgiving. She said it the way she announced things that had already been decided, without inflection, as if my attendance were already factored in rather than requested. Marcus would be there. She mentioned this the way you mention details you assume don't require explanation. She also mentioned, at the end of the call, almost as an afterthought, that Marcus was bringing a business partner, an investor he had been working with. Very successful, she said. Her voice carried the particular warmth it only ever had when she was describing Marcus's world. I said I would come. Daniel Hartwell arrived before me. When I walked through my parents' front door and saw him standing in the living room with a glass of water, talking to my father about the housing market, I understood in the space of a single breath that he had done his research in ways that went beyond what Marcus had shown him. He looked up when I came in. Something shifted in his expression. Not surprise, but recognition. The specific kind of recognition that comes from seeing in person what you have only previously studied on a page. I nodded at him. He nodded back. I took off my coat. Dinner proceeded the way holiday dinners in my family always did. My mother served Marcus's plate before mine. My father directed most of his conversation toward Marcus, asking questions about the project with the bright, focused attention he had always reserved for his son. Marcus answered with fluency and detail. He was good at that, always had been, the ability to speak knowledgeably about things he had not built. And the table leaned in the way tables do when someone they have already decided to admire begins to perform. I ate quietly. I answered when I was spoken to. I watched Daniel Hartwell from across the table. He was not doing what the rest of the table was doing. He was not leaning in. He was listening in a different way, the way an auditor listens, or a person who already knows the answer and is waiting to see whether the speaker will find it on their own. When the plates were cleared and my mother brought coffee and the table settled into the loosened, warmer conversation that follows a meal, Marcus pushed back from his chair with the ease of someone who has never doubted his right to the floor. He reached over and gripped Daniel's shoulder. I want everyone to properly meet the man who's helping make this project a reality. He turned his smile across the table, landing finally on me with the casual precision of a knife finding its mark. And this is my sister. She wanted to be an architect, too. He let the pause expand. Didn't quite work out. My father smiled. My mother smoothed her napkin. The relatives at the far end of the table shifted in their seats with the mild discomfort of people who know they are watching something unkind but have decided to let it pass. Daniel Hartwell set down his coffee cup. He looked at me. He looked at me for long enough that the table noticed. I know who she is, he said. She's the reason I'm here. The room rearranged itself around those words. Marcus kept his smile on, but something beneath it had changed. The way a wall looks the same right before the crack in it spreads. I'm not sure what you... I pulled the original file metadata, Daniel said. He was not raising his voice. He did not need to. Before this trip, my team did a thorough review of the design documents you sent us. He reached into the inside pocket of his jacket and placed a folded printout on the table. The conceptual framework, the site analysis, the phased approach. Every document has embedded authorship data. The methodology traces directly to her published work. He nodded at me. Her name is in every file you sent me. You just removed it from the cover pages. The silence was the kind that is weight. You could feel it pressing down on the tablecloth, on the candlesticks, on the whole careful performance of the evening. That's not, Marcus started. There are also access logs, Daniel continued, from the shared folder she sent you, showing the download times, the file renames, the submission dates. He looked at Marcus with an expression that was not angry. It was worse than angry. It was final. I called Patricia Weir at Hafford Design last week. She walked me through the documentation. My father's face had gone the color of old wax. My mother's hands were very still on the table. Marcus turned to me. For the first time in my life, there was no performance in his face. Just something raw and caught. You set this up. I looked at him. I documented what happened, I said. There's a difference. Daniel spoke to me directly then, the rest of the table having receded into its own stunned interior. I want to formally partner with Hafford on the Pacific Northwest project, with you as lead designer. I should have been speaking with you from the beginning. He paused. I apologize for the time it took me to get here. I told him I appreciated that. I meant it without warmth and without coldness. I just meant it plainly, the way you mean something true. What followed in that room was not a scene I want to detail with too much precision. I will say that my father tried, twice, to redirect the conversation towards something that allowed Marcus a way out, and both times the attempt collapsed under its own weight because there was nothing left to redirect. I will say that my mother looked at me, once, with an expression I had not seen on her face before. Not apology exactly, but the thing that precedes apology in people who have not yet learned how to make one. I will say that Marcus left the table before coffee was finished and stood in the kitchen for a long time, and no one went in after him. I stayed until the end of the meal. I helped carry plates to the kitchen. I put on my coat and said goodnight to my father, who did not meet my eyes, and to my mother, who held my hand a moment longer than usual before releasing it. Outside, the November air was cold enough to make everything sharp and clean. I stood on the front step for a moment, not going anywhere yet, just breathing. There is a version of this story that ends with a speech, a catharsis, some declaration delivered across the table that finally makes the people who withheld their attention understand what they lost. I used to imagine that version when I was younger. I think most people do. The moment where you say the true and devastating thing and the room falls into silence and everyone finally sees. That's not what happened. What happened was quieter and stranger, and in the end, more lasting. What happened was that the truth arrived in the form of metadata and access logs, and one man doing his homework, and it didn't need me to perform it. It only needed me to have built it carefully enough that it held. Daniel Hartwell's team sent the formal partnership offer to Hafford Design the following Monday. The project was restructured with my name as principal designer and co-strategist on record. The press release, when it went out, used a quote from Daniel that I read 3 times sitting at my desk with my morning coffee. This project reflects the kind of spatial thinking and community integration that only comes from someone who has spent years building a real methodology. We're proud to be partnering with the person who actually built it. Marcus's role in the project was terminated. I heard this secondhand from Patricia at Hafford, who told me in her usual measured way and then asked if I had any questions. I said no. I didn't need the details to feel the outline of it. My father called me in December. It was a short call. He said he had been thinking and that he hadn't always been fair to me growing up, and that he hoped I knew they were proud of me. He said it carefully, like a person reading from a page they had written and then almost thrown away. I thanked him. I didn't fill the silence after that with reassurance, which I think he was hoping for. I let the silence be what it was. Not punishing, not forgiving, just the space between a thing that happened and a thing that hasn't yet. My mother sent me a card. Inside it she had written, in her careful looping handwriting, I should have read that letter from the architecture program more carefully. I've thought about that a lot. I put the card on my windowsill next to a small succulent I had been keeping alive for 2 years. I'm not sure what will happen with my family from here. I stopped trying to predict it, which is different from having given up. I call on Sundays. I keep the conversations honest and short. I don't perform warmth, I don't feel, but I don't perform coldness either. I'm learning to exist in the same relationship with them that I have with my work. Present, attentive, unwilling to pretend something is finished before it actually is. The Portland office where I work now has a corner desk I chose myself, oriented toward the window that looks out over a stretch of the Willamette. In the morning, the light comes in at an angle that changes as the season changes, and I have started to track it the way I used to track the acceptance letters and the hidden envelopes and the things I kept in drawers. Not because I'm holding on to them, but because paying attention to the things that are yours is a practice. Something you build slowly, the same way you build anything that's meant to last. I was asked recently to speak at the same regional conference where I had presented my methodology 3 years earlier. The organizer wanted me to talk about process, how you develop a design framework, how you protect it, how you keep it intact when the project moves from concept to execution to the world. I thought about what to say for a long time. I thought about the sketchbooks in the bottom drawer, the drafting job I worked at 23 to pay my own tuition, the parking garage where I sat with my laptop on my passenger seat and began building a folder called Documents, the Thanksgiving table and the sound of a wine glass being set down with very particular intention. I thought about the fact that my brother had looked at what I built and seen something worth taking, which meant, if you look at it in a certain light, that he understood its value even when our parents didn't. There's something in that worth sitting with. What I told the room in the end was something I had not planned to say. I told them that the most important document in any design process is the one with your name on it, not on the cover page, where anyone can change it, but in the structure itself. In the decisions you made, they can only have been made by someone who thought the way you think. Build it so thoroughly that it can't be mistaken for anyone else's work, I said, and the record will hold even when the surface doesn't. The room was quiet for a moment after that. Not the hollow kind, the good kind. I flew home the same evening, a late flight that arrived past midnight, the Portland skyline below the plane looking like a circuit board lit from within. I took a cab back to my apartment, an east-facing unit on the 4th floor with high ceilings and a long kitchen counter where I keep my sketchbooks now. Not in any drawer, not underneath anything, just there, in the light, where I can see them when I walk in. I made tea and stood at the window for a while looking at the city below, doing the quiet work it does after midnight. Buses moving, a restaurant closing, someone walking a dog along the empty sidewalk with the particular unhurried pace of a person who has decided the evening is theirs. I went to bed and slept without difficulty. That, more than anything, is what I want to tell you. Not the conference, not the partnership, not the table going quiet when the right person said the right thing at the right time. All of that happened, and it mattered, but it isn't the thing I carry with me. What I carry is the sleep. The kind that comes when you've stopped waiting for someone else to confirm that what you built was real. You don't need them to see it. You already know what it is. That's enough. It turns out that's been enough for a long time.